All right, hello everyone. Thank you again for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. So welcome to the second webinar in the Summer Prevention Webinar Series. My name is Jessie Corcoran. I'm the Prevention Coordinator at WCASA. And we have organized this webinar series for the summertime on purpose because we know that a lot of prevention educators are really busy during the school year. So we really hope that this timing is working out for you all in the work that you're doing. And please, if you have any feedback regarding this webinar series, this is our second annual prevention series, and so I'd really like to continue hearing your feedback. If there are topics that you'd like to see in the future, if you have feedback about this topic, if you have feedback about other topics, please always feel free to be reaching out to me. My email is right there on the first slide, jessiec@wcasa.org. Oh, sorry, this one. In this series, we have a lot of really, really great topics. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about gender socialization and sexual violence. Today, we're going to be talking about integrating an anti-oppression approach into sexual violence prevention, and we have some really exciting presenters for you today. In a couple of weeks, we have a webinar about male engagement and allyship in prevention. And then a couple weeks after that, we have another webinar on pornography and normalizing the relationship between violence and sex. I also have a surprise. We are adding one more webinar to the series. I'm really, really excited. This is a presenter. Her name is Meg Foster. I saw her present at the National Sexual Assault Conference, and she is from the Oregon Sexual Assault Task Force. And she's going to be doing a webinar about teaching good sex, a method for violence prevention. And so she talks about how healthy sexuality and sexual education is a huge part of preventing sexual violence, and how can we take a sex-positive and healthy sexuality approach in the violence prevention work that we're doing. So really, really excited that we could snag her as a presenter. And again, that's going to be on Thursday, August 3rd. Just as a reminder, all of these webinars are from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Central Time. So I also want to point out a few things about just using the panel and the features of the webinar. Just so you know, there is a chat box where sometimes we will be posting a few questions, or we can post a few resources that come up, so we'll be typing some things in there. Make sure you're looking out for that. If there's some links that come up, you can click them there. Also, there's a questions box as well. So if you have questions while the presenters are chatting, feel free to type it in. The organizers, we will be monitoring the questions as they roll in, and we'll make sure that your question gets asked of the presenter. And we do want to, especially today for our topic of anti-oppression, really, really encourage questions, because as Anika Leonard, one of our presenters, said this morning, you know, anti-oppression is really not this step-by-step perfect process, right? So if you have questions that are more specific to what the work that you're doing, or the things that you're seeing and the ways that you're trying to integrate anti-oppression into your prevention work, please, please, please be typing in those questions. We have really great presenters today, again, who are super open and willing to answer your questions. So a quick note, I wanted to point out, especially as our topic today is anti-oppression, that WCASA just this past January of this year did release our Anti-Oppression Framework. This is the text of that. I'm not going to read it necessarily, but it is available on our website under our mission page. And so I wanted you to know that, you know, WCASA is really trying to integrate anti-oppression as much as possible and weave it throughout the work that we're doing. And we're trying to do more than just have this be a statement, this pretty thing that we put on our page, but actually try to put this into action. So if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about that background or the things that we are trying to do to integrate that into our work, please feel free to reach out to us here at WCASA. We'd be happy to talk a little bit more about that. But I really want to turn it over to our really amazing presenters. They have some great content for you today. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Adams and Alice Skinador of Wise Women Gathering Place in Brown County of Wisconsin. So Jessica and Alice, let me know if you have any trouble getting your screen up. Here we go. All right. Can you hear us all right? Yes, we can. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Adams, and I am the Sexual Assault Prevention Specialist at Wise Women Gathering Place, and I'm also a sexual assault advocate as well. And I'm with Alice.
And I'm the director at Wise Women Gathering Place, and happy to be here. Thank you. So, okay, I'll just go ahead and go.
Sure.
All right. So our first thing that we wanted to tell you about was the mission of Wise Women Gathering Place. And we've worked on this for years, and it's changed over the years many times, but it's kind of settled in this place now where our mission is to promote peace, respect, and belonging using skill building, sharing of resources, and caring support for our community. How we figured that through was by recognizing that everything that we teach, all of our programs, we screen them through those aspects of that mission statement as we do them and before we do them and as we plan them, because we feel like that's infusing that peace, respect, and belonging into the way we do our work.
Yeah, exactly. So our approach to this, to the anti-oppression work in regards to sexual violence, comes from our own personal approach from within ourselves and continued in our work with each other as staff and as individual co-workers, which makes a foundation for our work in the community. And we don't go right to the target of sexual assault, and I think I'll let Alice explain this a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of been always like a problem, an issue for me, because always the funders and the leaders in the different things that I'm involved in always want us to take it right to the problem, right straight to the problem. Let's go attack sexual assault and make it go away. And I feel like we've been doing that a long time, and I don't think it's working as well as some of the other things that we do. It's sort of like working with a little child, if they're having a temper tantrum and you go after their temper tantrum with your response that is similar, they get worse. But if you instead use another method like distracting or giving them something else to do, or starting using a different method that is from the peace, respect, and belonging side of life, I think that works better.
So you should have available to you a PDF with the ecological systems theory, and we wanted to share this because this demonstrates that no single cause determined or that no single cause is just fits in one of these areas. This model considers sorry, we have a training going on. I'm not sure if you're hearing that background noise. This model considers the complex interplay between individual, relationship, community, and societal factors, and allows us to understand the range of factors that put people at risk for violence or protect them from experiencing or perpetrating violence. And we use this in our work. We feel like we do this work at all these different levels, on the individual level, the relationship, the community, societal, and how they all kind of feed back and forth within each other. So when we're talking about our different approaches, you can kind of think back and refer to this. And we feel that our multifaceted approaches can fit into these different areas. So next are some examples of how we deal with oppression on these different levels.
So one of them is looking at how it happened and exploring and recognizing what happened. How did we get here in this place? And part of that, at least for our tribal people, our Native American people, is recognizing the historical oppression that we have experienced, and learning from some of the new information that comes out all the time now. We're even learning that oppression and those harms have been passed on to us not only through behaviors and newly formed traditions based on the danger, but also even through our DNA. It's physical. We've even got it physical, and recognizing that how we've internalized our own oppression to use it against our members of our own group and against our own self. Those are natural outcomes and completely predictable to the eventuality in historical oppression.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. So historical oppression affects all peoples. We all have this that has been passed on from our ancestors through our DNA, maybe because they've experienced wars, starvation, slavery, oppression, abuse of all sorts of different kinds, deprivation, genocide. All people at some point have experienced this, like I said, and I'm going to show several slides of some groups just as an example who have experienced this. So sometimes you'll hear people talking about, oh, just get over it. That was a long time ago. I didn't do it. That wasn't me. That was, people long before I was ever around. And so we think that minimizing, denying, blaming, justifying is not helpful or healing, and that it's actually more harmful.
Yeah, I often hear people, especially people who have suffered those great recent traumas, African American people in the United States, the Native American people in the United States, in different countries where genocide and all that has happened in the recent past, where we're still freshly wounded from all of this, plus all of the past behaviors, plus the laws that have been embedded to hold those things in place, and the traditions. When we talk to people who, or when we hear people say things like that, like just get over it, or, oh, that was a long time ago and people thought differently then. Well, we know that's not true. We know that it wasn't a long time ago. We know that it's still affecting us, and we still live in the pain of what was done to us. So learning as we learn, like Jessica and I have been having a good conversation about allyship, and about how do we cross some of these chasms that are there, even for people who want to help and who come to help fix the problem, where they are experiencing the pain that people who've been oppressed recently and very big have expressed, and wondering how can we bring ourselves closer so that we can form a united front, and really even that united front sounds like a war thing, but and I'm trying to not do that. I want not to use violent language to do the peaceful things to get to peace.
So we know that we need to address this and to prevent it from passing it along, because science has shown that historical trauma that's being passed down through our genes or epigenetics can be undone with environmental enrichment. So how we deal with it here at Wise Women, or work on it, is through our White Bison Mending Broken Hearts Healing Program. And as a staff, we begin our employment by working to unpack trauma and learning to give and accept help and encouragement from other people around us while unpacking this trauma. So you go through it, you do it, you also learn the skill of it, and skill building is prevention, because we believe prevention can begin at any stage. We know trauma is carried through our DNA, and we can experience trauma at any stage in life, including in utero. And so the White Bison program helps you to look at your healing journey from a new lens. This is a program that is offered at least quarterly at our office. White Bison Mending Broken Hearts curriculum offers a culturally based way to heal unresolved grief and intergenerational trauma, especially for Native people from the U.S. and Canada.
So this next part here is a couple years back, we had our state coalitions brought Nancy Luna Jimenez here, and this is a lesson that I learned from her that we use everywhere and all the time now, because it's so important and it helps so much to be a corrector in some of this understanding of what's happening to us, and that is that this is the way we come, that nice circle filled with intelligence, curiosity, being a good person, being a loving person, being zestful and proud to be present and bring what you have to offer. And so that's how we come. And we come equipped with things to deal with life. And when like hurts come in, emotional or physical, and they come at us, we have that around the edge of the circle, we have laughing and crying and yawning and sleep and shaking and talking and sweating. We have those tools to discharge and emotionally heal from that hurt. And that allows us to maintain, I don't know if you can see it at the bottom on our screen, it's kind of obscured, but the flexible thinking. We can think still in a flexible way and be resilient because we have that thing. So the other thing that happens is that sometimes the hurts that come in are bigger than the hurts that we can deal with just by laughing or crying or shaking or talking or sleeping even. Those hurts come inside and we're not able to discharge them. Those are called traumas. And when traumas happen to us, that trauma, the pain of it, the memory of it, the experience of it lives inside of us. And it helps, it creates in us a kind of we stiffen up, we get a rigidity in our patterns that cause us to, when we get a re-stimulation of that memory, we bring it back in the form of hurt, and we use it on ourselves and on our group, like our children or our fellow co-workers or our fellow tribes people. You know, I mean, we just do that. We put it back on ourselves. And
it's a cycle similar to the cycle of abuse. And so when there's a big hurt, dysfunctional thinking occurs, or what we
we've renamed it
trauma-affected thinking.
And it's what takes us back to that original response of freeze, flee, or fight. That's down in our back brain, and not based on thinking things through, but just responding.
And not able to have as much of that flexible thinking, because you're living more in like that reptilian brain, which is our first part of our brainstem that was developed back in the caveman days when you had those options of doing that. So you're thinking, you're not able to have that flexible thinking, but you're thinking more from that trauma affected thinking.
So the approach that Wise Women has tried to use, and it came from my learnings as a midwife. I was a home birth midwife for 27 years, and I helped about 750 babies get born safely and peacefully at home. And one of my learnings as I went on that journey was to those bullets that we've got right there. Stop, pause, recenter yourself, stay present and knowing, but hold space. That is a midwifery approach. I believe that midwifery is the way women are, and I think it has so much more than birth as its focus. I believe that the true essence of midwifery is a lifelong, cradle-to-grave reality, and that's how we handle everything. People used to come to the elder wise women in the community because they knew all the traditions. They knew all about everybody's family. They knew all about how to make the outfits. They knew all about where to get the medicines and how to do the relationship issues, and they came to us for help and support from cradle to grave. Even in death, midwives were sought out for comfort and for direction of what to do and how to continue. And that approach, that midwifery approach, is what we use as our undercurrent for how we do our work here at Wise Women Gathering Place.
So we do that listening. We do use flexible thinking, and this is what we were mentioning before. Alice and Bev had created a list that they had derived from other things that they had found, and we use it in our discovery dating course. And we have two sides of it. We'd be willing to share if anyone's interested in looking at that.
And it's not totally our work. It's a composite of work of many people and many lists that were out there. And the one little interesting thing that happened with the making of this list is that we changed the title of the kind of negative side, because we found lists out there that were called, stinking thinking and different things like that. And we didn't want to name it a bad thing because we could see that even those things that are in there were things that helped people survive at a time of great trauma. And then to blame them by calling it stinking thinking after they were forced into that feeling, it seems unfair. So what we called it is trauma-affected survival thinking or behavior. And we think that's what it is. And I think also that if you give it a better name and allow the humanity to live in that name, people will be able to work on it more easily. Because if we give it a really bad name, we just shun it and say, oh, I don't have that, even if we totally have it. We just can't go there. We can't own it and go forward with the healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so reframing that perspective to be more trauma-informed when we're working with clients, too.
Jessica and Alice, we do have a question that just came in regarding actually the last slide just before this one. They said, I love the concept of staying present and knowing, but can you please explain the part of holding space? I would love to know more about that.
Oh.
I think, let me just double check. We are actually going to be going more into holding space in a few more slides if they're willing to.
Sure, but there is something I can say about it at this point. And I think it will just be that how I figured it out, because when I was a young midwife and first so excited to be allowed this opportunity to help other women have their babies, I was so energized by that, and I wanted so much to do so much helping. I was rubbing backs and giving affirmations and just doing everything I could think of, baking cookies, whatever. And as time went on, I learned that some of my interjection, no matter how great, how kind, how well-intentioned it was interfering in that person's process. And as I learned to calm down and just be present, that is a skill to learn. And that presence without interfering is what I'm talking about as far as what is holding space. It's being there, that person knowing you're ready, knowing you support them, understanding and feeling supported that you believe in them, and doing that all without, actually doing anything or interjecting anything. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you, Alice.
And the last thing that I wanted to say, I know I mentioned that we use that flexible thinking worksheet and the understanding trauma affective thinking in our discovery dating class, which was developed by Alice. It's a promising evidence-based practice, and we think that by observing and recognizing and becoming cognizant of those different types of thinking that can really work to interrupt the oppression.
So this is about staying with Nancy Luna's lesson about how we are, and this is just a little illustration that I drew with my great artistic ability to just recognize that out there in the world, outside of ourselves, there's good stuff and bad stuff, easy stuff and hard stuff, and familiar and frightening stuff. It's all there. And so outside of that place, that our safety zone is possibly new experiences and new learning and new discoveries, but also possibly our death or our harm or our fear out there waiting to be fed too. So so in our fully functioning state, when we're not trauma affected, we have a very wide learning path. That's that big fat circle that's around our inner self. And
it has lots of flexible thinking in there.
Yeah, so we're feeling free to learn. But once we get those traumas inside of us, that takes up space, and it brings on that rigidity and causes our learning zone to become slimmer. So there's not so much willingness to go and explore. And it can even get worse as it gets bigger and bigger, and we experience trauma and we don't heal it, and it's compounded and added to. Our safety zone then gets pretty close to our panic zone, and it leaves us very little room to go exploring for new awarenesses.
And there's a battery analogy I like to use that I learned when I was trained in heart math. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with that. But when your battery is full, you're really resilient, you're able to go through things when you're in this circle where you're able to have the flexible thinking. But when your battery is low and you've got 3%, everything affects you more. Everything is harder to, you're not as resilient, you're not as flexible thinking, you have more of that rigid thinking or that trauma-informed thinking. So trying to maintain, to keep that battery full so that you can live in that circle here.
And this is another little illustration about how maybe that band and that circle isn't always the same at every moment and in every experience. Sometimes we're much easier to panic, and sometimes we're much easier to be cautious or to explore, depending on how we feel and how we're supported at the moment. And it is not always a constant. This is how you are. We have lots of opportunities to have both.
So wise women here, we like to practice these. In our trainings, in our staff meetings, we like to practice a lot of restorative skills to give space for growing, to replenish that battery when it's depleted. So we practice constructivist listening. And this is what the question about holding space, that is one of the ways we do that. The kind of guidelines of constructivist listening is to be present with the speaker. So for example, during our staff meetings, before we begin, everybody gets 1 moment to kind of check in and share what's going on. A full minute. And they don't have to speak for that full minute, but sometimes people we just hold space for that whole moment and that minute, and we just sit there with them, and that space is for them. We don't interrupt, we don't show expression, we don't react to it if we don't
issue them any signal that they've said enough, or that, yeah, we got the idea, you can go. We just allow them to keep where they're at or go farther on their own without our help or our intrusion in any way.
And keeping confidentiality within that space. And we also use another program that we offer at Wise Women is the technology of participation, the power of image shift.
Which is, well, the top facilitation, the reason we embrace that one so good is because it came out of the peace movement, and it was developed over 50 years from people who were trying to help people groups of people who had traditionally fought against each other and had become enemies and were very dangerous to each other, to help them come together and find a shared awareness and then reach a shared agreement. And it was done over that amount of time, making all the mistakes and watching people shut down and go away, and learning from that and staying with it until they came to a place where using that process includes the use of complete inclusion of every voice and profound respect for all that is said. Once an idea comes out in the group, it stays as part of the fabric of the finished product. And so we just embrace that because we feel like that's how you do, like I was telling Jessica when we first were coming on, I said, I wonder what the opposite word is of anti-oppression, because oppression is still there in that word, and I don't like that. I wanna take that violent thing out of the idea, and I wish that we could find out how to do that. And I looked up the word to find the antonym, and they have things like joy and happiness, and I don't think those are antonyms of oppression. I think that there should be a word we could figure out. I challenge everybody, come up with one, send it to us. That'd be great, because I think that's the kind of thing we want to do, is reuse our words, rechange our words, and not focus on the violence, but focus on those supports around that person to help them be resilient, even in the face of those violences. So,
we also use nonviolent communication. We have a handout that we use in our Discovery Dating program, which is not just about dating, but we have it with. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say the nonviolent communication is something that we use that exists out there. Mm-hmm. There is a really big course that, and many courses actually, that you can take to learn about different aspects of nonviolent communication. There are week-long retreats, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to learn about. And we've brought pieces of that we've learned online and through books that we've purchased we use them in our Discovery Dating work. Yeah.
and of course practicing self-care. One thing that I really loved about coming to work at Wise Women Gathering Place is that Alice and Bev are, they know that people need to take care of themselves to, you know, get back so you can
if you need
fully function and have that flexible thinking, you know, so taking care of ourselves is a really big piece here.
And we do that. We do that in a lot of ways by, you know, if people have to have a dental appointment for their child in the afternoon, we don't stress them about that. They can go do that and come back and make up the time later on, or, you know, whatever. We just let us know and try not to schedule it when you've got a class that you're supposed to present at or something. But other than that, we fully support that. If they feel sick and need to go home, we ask them to go take care of yourself, you know. And we also have like acceptingness of their lives, you know. If one of our policies is that you can bring your baby for a full year. When your baby, you know, up until your baby's a year old, you can bring your baby to work, and we'll just all pitch in and help with that baby, and you can still be mom or dad. We don't have any dads yet, but it can happen.
And responding to community requests that we really are what I think is grassroots.
Yeah, I feel like, well, I don't feel like, I can go through every single program we've ever done, and every one of them came about as a result of the community asking us for help with that issue. And if we didn't know how to fix it or work on it, we went out and got training in that regard. When one of our first programs that we had, besides we started our own stuff as midwives, but the community came to us because we were midwives and asked us to help teach young people about, you know, what can happen when you have sex, you know, having a baby. We taught them what it's like to have a baby. We went out and bought those dolls that you can, you know, take care of for the weekend, that will record how you do it and report on your parenting. And we went and got trained in different aspects of understanding sexuality for youth, like how to put on condoms, and, you know, a good way of teaching that, and how to learning about abstinence and so forth. So that was a direct response to the community coming to us for help with that. And I think they came to us because we were trusted midwives in the community.
And the last couple slides, if we still have time to talk about, is AdultISM. We think that AdultISM is a training ground for all oppression. Many of the original hurts that we experience are committed against us through AdultISM. It's through AdultISM that young people have been conditioned into acting out both oppressed and oppressor roles. All right. So how we work to respond to not try to be practicers of being, you know, not using AdultISM is really working with our groups. We have a Wise Youth program, which is what I coordinate in my role as sexual assault prevention specialist, and working with the Wise Youth to grow as leaders, and using tools such as our top facilitation methods, and doing, the picture here is a consensus workshop that we had used from that top program that Alice was talking about, that derived from the peace movement, and integrating youth voice and carrying it over even into our grant writing.
And in the process, not only did she do those with the children, but she teaches them the skill of how to do it themselves, so that they can actually run a conversation with a large group and know how to do the different parts of a focused conversation.
Yeah, so I put this slide in here because this is interesting. This is our high school Wise Youth group this fall. This is their consensus workshop that it has their voice in it. And then we had recently applied for a grant, and we were trying to think of how we can help support the WISE youth, and we're like, oh, well, this is what they want. This is their words. This is what they want to work on. So using this to fit into the grant, and so it's really not us creating the grant. It was them. And also, they are facilitators of the Discovery Dating curriculum, which uses, as Alice was saying, the top facilitation methods. And that's another way is to really work with them. So they are then presenting to our middle school WISE Youth program, and they have that peer-to-peer modeling, and they have the voice to share with their peers about discovery dating and communication.
And the subtle thing about that is when those older kids realize that how important they are to those younger children's decision-making and lives, I think it gives them a reason to be a good person and a reason to think and make good decisions that are ones that they would be proud of after the fact, you know. And I feel like that's you know, kind of being on that outer edge of that person rather than going after the sexual assault stuff, you know, directly. Just gently pulling those and strengthening those parts of that person that are ready to be, you know, strengthened. I think that's another way, and I feel like that's a way of really going against oppression.
And we wanted to give you resources for, we mentioned Nancy Luna Jimenez and Lillian Roybal Rose, who created those diagrams that we showed earlier with the circles. So if you have more, if you want to look more into that, here is a website, you can check them out.
And we don't have the website for nonviolent communication, but that's also all over the web. Check it out. It's so helpful.
I think you can look for compassionate communication.
That too.
And all of our programs that we had mentioned here today, that we talk about prevention and anti-oppression work, so the discovery dating, the white bites and many broken hearts, or our top trainings, you can find them all on our website here if you're interested, and those are available to people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Alice. I always love hearing from both of you. We here at WCASA are always so impressed with all of the work that you do, so interested in that midwifery approach that you take to sexual assault and domestic violence work. So thank you so much for what you do and for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and turn it over to our next presenter, Anika Leonard from Priceless Incite of Milwaukee. Anika, let's see if we can see your screen.
Hello?
Awesome, there we go.
Can you see it? Yes.
Yes, we see, I keep forgetting to tell you this, Anika, but I love your logo. It's so cool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So hi everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Anika. I am the founding director of an organization called Priceless Incite. And the idea around Priceless Incite, I'll get into it a little bit later, but since Jesse mentioned the logo really represents an interruption in the typical service delivery model, if you will. So that's why people are in the middle of it. I'm actually one of those people. Samantha Collier is one of those people, and then some other folks from the community. So we are really engaged in the work, as you can see. And I'd like to thank you all for just even having me, and especially Wise Women Gathering. I loved your presentation, and I just want to say that. And we really complement each other's work, and so it's a natural follow through. So I bring with me the voice of many of my ancestors who were kidnapped and enslaved, many who were brought to this country, were raped, women, men, and children forced to engage in practices that built this America on the backs of our Native brothers and sisters and trans folks. So I just wanted to definitely make sure that I paid homage to, especially in a conversation around sexual assault prevention, some of the folks who really paved the way for us to even do this work and to have some of the language that we're using. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'll tell you a little bit about the organization. I'll speak some of my truths. I'll talk about the Diamonds Are Forever Priceless curriculum, which is a curriculum that I created as a way to address prevention, but in a as a backdoor way. It's similar to what they're doing over at Wise Women Gathering. Like I'm not addressing sexual violence head on. I kind of take a backdoor approach. So one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to have an analysis. I'm going to ask you all to boycott some things, and then we're going to have some questions, comments, concerns, etc. And please feel free to ask any questions during the meantime if you want to know more about something, because this is a really non-traditional way of doing prevention work. So I want to make sure that there's space for folks to ask their very specific questions around it. So I have been doing domestic and sexual violence prevention work for about 10 years now, both formally and informally. Informally has been a lot longer, but I really didn't have the language and didn't know that this is what I was doing. And I'm currently working to build the capacity of Priceless Incite to be youth-led, and it is culturally specific. So, also the goal is to marry direct action and service delivery. The mission is to uplift the experiences of young Black women, LGBTI, and gender nonconforming youth who are impacted by violence. We work to create a society that honors the inherent value of all youth through education, culturally specific advocacy, and development. We envision a world where the transformation of the pain that causes harm is valued over the profit of its transaction. And I can get into that a little later if you all want. I can just kind of break that down, but hopefully it'll be self-evident throughout the presentation. So I'd like to talk to you all a little bit about some of the services and programs that we have. We provide training and technical assistance in addition to the traditional sexual assault service provider services that are offered if you get like certain funding. So we also provide training and technical assistance around advocacy, intersectionality, culturally specific domestic and sexual violence prevention and intervention, youth-adult partnerships, and racial justice. We do that across the board, so hire us. We have an awesome team. There's the team right there. You will notice that I am in the middle, the guy in the back. We are recruiting to join our side, but he hasn't quite come on board yet. We're still in negotiation processes. So the thing that I want to talk about a little bit is truth. And Dr. Joy DeGruy, she travels the world and she talks about the impact of slavery and what that's had on America. And one of the things that she highlights is our inability to reconcile and acknowledge our past and how that prevents us from moving forward. So today I come to you as a person who's been impacted by racist behaviors, policies, and practices of folks who advocate to end violence. So this is my truth. And I'd like to share a poem with you all as a way of expressing that. The poem is called Black Woman Heal. Forget what happened, heal. Yes, I yelled, heal. I caused you harm, heal. I took your dignity, ate it for breakfast, pooped it out for lunch. Now I'm back for more. In the meantime, heal. Don't touch my hair, heal. We are doing better, heal. Be a bigger person, heal. You are so resilient, heal. Heal, because as soon as you're done, I'm going to come take from you. Heal, and when you do, I'll be sure to bring charges up against you. You are too passionate, too confident, too Black. You are not in my box, not in my circle, or in my life in a substantial way. I just serve your community 9 to 5. I know what's best for you, so heal. But hide your pain. It's too ugly for me to hear about. I can't handle it. Heal. But don't show up in empowered ways or in ways that speak truth to power. Heal. While you do, I'll pit someone up against you. Someone who looks like you. I'll parade them around as if there's something wrong with you. But institutionalized racism looks good on you. Heal. And while you do, cry. And when you do, I'll write you up and tell you how unprofessional you were for showing your humanity. Heal. I will put your life in danger while working to end violence. Heal. I am healing because I realize that my healing gives others courage to heal. Causing harm does not mean we are bad people. It means we need to heal. Being harmed is not our primary and only identity. It means we've got work to do to heal and to deepen our connections to each other. Heal. So thank you for being patient and to listening to that. And there are several truths that I like to share about oppression, which are definitely not my original work, but oppression is pervasive and it impacts us all. Our self-work, our healing, and our self-love are absolutely necessary for the acceptance of others. I can't give anyone what I don't give myself. Conflict and discomfort are also a part of our growth. Even though oppression is not our fault, we are oftentimes born into situations due to layers of our identity. It is our responsibility to change. There are no quick fixes. Like, we can't just go to the store and buy a anti-oppression antivirus, you know, like we have to actually do some work, and that work can be done by individuals and organizations. There is hope for change. We can all do better together. So I come to this work knowing that my healing deepens my ability to create spaces where deep healing can occur. And my job and our job as service providers and community members and just humans in general is to remove the focus from what someone else should do and bring it back to ourselves. So one of the ways that I did this is through the creation of the Diamonds Are Forever Priceless curriculum. That is basically like my process and was my process to heal. So it is a primary prevention framework in that it uses the skills, it's a skill-based program or curriculum. So we use a lot of organic processes, a lot of storytelling, a lot of presentations that are given. Youth are given opportunities to present at statewide conferences. I just took a young person to present with me at the National Sexual Assault Conference in Dallas, Texas this year. This curriculum, it basically meets folks where they're at. I don't advocate for anyone to stop anything that they're doing, because I realize it's a process. And oftentimes we are caught in this cycle of, if I can tell you what's wrong with you and you fix it, then the problem is solved. And it's really like everybody has their own choices and we're all accountable for our own behavior. And I like to try to just promote us to fix our own, you know, stuff. Like, there's a song, Sweep Around Your Own Back Porch and Don't Try to Sweep Around Mine. It's a super old song that I used to hear like in the Christian religion a lot as a young person, and I find that to be very true right now. Like, we need to get to our root causes and get to our core beliefs and figure out why we're so intent on fixing everyone else and turning the attention outside instead of looking inside at what we can do and who we are and why we are so impacted by someone doing something that we don't want them to do. So similar to the work of Wise Women, the Diamonds Are Forever Priceless curriculum is a proxy. I use this to discuss really difficult information. It promotes self-awareness, autonomy. It promotes action and provides tools throughout the process. I won't talk a lot about the curriculum. I'll just use some of the framework of the curriculum and allow a lot of time for questions and answers and things like that later on. But what I will tell you is that during the process, we are talking about forgiveness, we're talking about oppression, we're talking about all of these things, but young people are actually, they're also self-actualizing. They're saying what their values are, what their characteristics are, what they do and don't want, so they're expressing their boundaries. All of these things are taking place, and the young people are creating a book, and that book is their tool to remind them of what they said, and that's their touch point to go back to when they are in a relationship, for instance, and that relationship is not giving them, you know, what they hoped for, what they said in their book. They said that they wanted someone who was loving and caring, and now they've got to hold themselves accountable. So it's something that they will have with them after I am not there anymore. So it is also a peer-led. So my young people, one semester they go through the workshop, and then the next semester, or the program, and then the next semester, some of them come back and they're interns, so they actually lead within the classrooms with their peers. It is trauma-informed. It encourages authenticity and modeling healthy communication. We also do a lot of work around critical thinking because oppression is very pervasive. Like, we have been taught a lot of things from early on, and that's one of the other things that we'll be talking about a little later. Okay, I'm trying to advance the slide. Okay, there we go. So I know a lot about diamonds because I have researched it a lot to make sure that I have my analogy on point. And one of the things that happens in terms of diamonds is they are formed, but they are of course formed over thousands of years. There's a lot of pressure involved. Once that diamond is formed, it's found by someone, mined, if you will. Once it's mined, it's cut into a shape, and it is priced, and then it is sold. So I take this analogy and apply it to the life of a young person. So as a part of the natural byproduct of a diamond being formed, a diamond has inclusions. So you have to cut a diamond properly in order for it to shine the brightest. So you've got to get rid of as many of those inclusions as possible. So throughout the curriculum, my young people and I talk about what those inclusions are. What were we born with or into, or what are we carrying that basically doesn't help us shine as much. So, excuse me, so I included this picture of the diamond, and inside you'll see some acronyms and you'll see some words. And I saw these inclusions as a way that I confined myself. So I've experienced a lot. I was an adult child survivor of domestic violence, or witness to domestic violence. I experienced child sexual assault. I experienced date rape. I was a teen mom, experienced teen dating violence, had lots of low self-esteem, a survivor of interstate human trafficking, and of course post-traumatic slave syndrome. So like all of these things helped me build a wall around myself, and basically carried a lot of trauma and pain with me. And it wasn't until recently that I figured out that this was also how I was leading with this trauma and pain. So in terms of how I was socialized, from my earliest memories of seeing violence happen all around me and thinking that the world was not a safe place, you know, so hence I built those walls, which were defined by, you know, those sections in the diamond. So I built walls, and those walls basically were to protect me, you know, in my mind, they were to protect me, but they also, like, they had me caged in. They had me buying into that rigid thinking that Alice spoke about earlier. I did not realize in my leadership, in the way that I carried myself, in the work that I did, that I thought I was one of the most open people out there, you know. But in doing this process, I realized that I'd had some ways that I wasn't budging. I was very rigid or black and white in my thinking in a lot of ways that were a result of the trauma that I experienced that I had no clue about. So that's why I really advocate for this process of going deep inside, because sometimes we really think we have it and we don't, you know. So I won't walk through this whole cycle of socialization. I will just say that, you know, we're socialized by, most of the time, by people that we love, through our roles in society, and that is reinforced through culture, through institutions, and once that's done, we have the results of that. So as a black girl in America, there are certain things that like value was not placed on my life, you know, other than my ability to create something. And creating something definitely meant, like, so if I created a child, like I was a teen parent, if I created a child, there was an organization that could give funding for me creating that child. But was there a meaningful point of intervention that really met me where I was at? You know, because like we can't have a pregnancy prevention campaign, for instance, without addressing why I was even engaging in those behaviors to begin with. So a lot of our prevention work, it focuses on like the symptoms and not actually addressing the root cause of it. So when I do my work with young people and within myself, you know, because I had to do it for myself first, I had to really figure out like what was it that caused me to search for something outside of myself. And we could fill in the blank about what that thing is, but I really searched outside of myself for things. And so my prevention work is basically bringing that right back in and returning that power to that person. So in terms of the work that we do now, so we have a client who has experienced harm, right? And I have clients in air quotes because I personally wish that is one of the words that we would like boycott and like absolutely not use anymore, there is a real separation between the people who have been harmed and the people that we are in service to and us as professionals in the work. And you heard a little bit about that in my Black Girl Hill poem. I think that we should definitely do our best to remove that barrier as a part of our anti-oppression work, because we are no different. We may have experienced things differently. We have different levels of privilege, because I'm talking about healing a lot right now. A lot of people do not even have the privilege to do as much of the work that I've done on myself to heal, so I'm also holding space and keeping that in mind as well. So we have people who've experienced harm, and they are separated or maybe not separated or different from the employees of the community-based organizations or the sexual assault service providers. And those folks are basically receiving money or funding to tell people how they should heal or what they should do in order to satisfy the employees or the service providers. And I think that we really need to take a look at this. Of course, it is so much more complex and nuanced than this, but we've got to take a look at this very it's a very simplistic, but also very telling model, because this is the root of oppression in our communities. This is the root of it to me. Like, there is a problem that was created by policies and institutions and practices and stereotypes, and then there is a funding stream that is designed to, air quotes, solve that problem, and the problem necessarily isn't solved, but everyone benefits from the problem at play. So there's a lot of work that we need to do. So in terms of the analysis that I use, because I think I'm pretty clever and I like to play on the word priceless a lot. And we're going to define price as an unwelcome experience, the event or action involved in a condition of achieving a desired result. So there is a price that we pay for buying into the socialization, for buying into stereotypes, and even buying into victimization. Like we've experienced harm at some point in our lives due to vulnerability, due to our gender identity, whatever the case may be. But just because we've experienced that doesn't mean that we need to carry that with us all the time. So sometimes we pay the price of not having peace of mind. Sometimes we pay the price of our humanity. There are so many different ways that we pay the price of buying into misinformation or misinterpreting misinformation or even living in fear. We pay a price. The community that we serve pays a price. And I'm interested in this whole price and around this cost analysis being switched and transferred. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's also a transaction, which is an exchange between people. The transaction is really like a transfer of pain, a transfer of fear, a transfer of harm. And this is another thing that I want to interrupt in terms of the logo that you all saw earlier. It's a barcode. There are people in there that interrupt that barcode. I want to interrupt that transaction because the cost, which is what the amount that's paid to obtain something, the cost of us being trapped in this cycle of oppression is our lives. At some point, it costs us our humanity. We are not able to look at each other as if we are siblings or brothers and sisters and gender nonconforming and trans folks. Like, we're not able to look at each other for our full selves. We only see a glimpse, a piece of the person. We see that, oh, well, this person has experienced sexual assault and that is who you are. You are the client. But in addition to being a client, I'm also a mother. I am also a friend. I am also an auntie. There's so many other layers of my identity, and it is not anyone's job to fix that. It is mine. You can empower, you can guide, you can support, you can engage, and you can provide tools, but ultimately the responsibility and the work is on me. And I want to make sure that the work that I'm doing is reflective of the self-determination and reflective of meeting folks where they're at, and not pushing agendas on folks and saying, okay, well, we've got this funding to say how you heal and what you do and how you keep yourself safe and how we prevent this, and not necessarily hearing from the folks who are most impacted by this issue. So during the curriculum, I provide spaces for young people to definitely give feedback, which is a part of, I want them to own this process, and that's a part of their buy-in. So some of the young women said that they don't want other young people to be afraid to open up and to say how they feel. Some of them said just be patient because they hated the class at first and now it's their favorite class. Like I had a wide variety of young people just basically sharing what they do and don't want, and you know, like how they didn't like the class at first and now they do. And it's just really interesting to hear the feedback from young people and to hear about what really stuck with them. So I basically, it's a fluid curriculum. I change according to what we're talking about and according to what feedback I receive from the young people. So I may have a lot of information around maybe community violence that comes up during our conversation. So I just kind of switch up our curriculum to talk about community violence at that time, you know. So how can we integrate a anti-oppression framework into sexual violence prevention? We can start by acknowledging who we are and how we've been socialized and how that shows up in our work. We can make mistakes and learn from them. Like, we are really hard on ourselves sometimes, and we need to forgive ourselves. Like, just I think the biggest source of oppression is fear. And sometimes we fear things because we fear and we don't forgive because we think that if we forgive that it will happen again. And we've got to be able to take risk and allow ourselves to forgive ourselves first and foremost, because a lot of us are carrying over pain that does impact our leadership ability, especially when we're trying to do this prevention work. So we've got to make sure that we are forgiving ourselves, because we can't give anybody anything that we don't have. And when I'm in the spaces with young people, I share with them, you know, I definitely share with them a lot of personal anecdotes and storytelling, because the things that I'm learning, the lessons that I'm learning along the way, I know that they're going to need in the future, you know. And I had no idea how early childhood trauma impacted the way that I have friends right now, or the relationships that I have with people. And I had no idea, and how that then even translated into the work that I'm doing. So I make sure that I make all of those connections, because we bring our whole selves, whether we know it or not, to the table. And if you are so hard on yourself and you're a perfectionist, you're going to look at other people and require that from them, which means that you are not meeting them where they're at, which means that your communication and the trust and all of that stuff is now tainted, which means that we're not going to be able to get at anything that you want to do in terms of prevention or whatever it is that your goals are to be with people. You've got to make sure that you're actually open to make that happen. So Alice, you talked a little bit about like the opposite of anti-oppression, and some folks have said that that is actually liberation. So making sure that we are reaching out and building community and coalescing with each other, creating change, maintaining that change, and getting ready. So some folks said that that is liberation work. So I would just let you all see that for a second and not necessarily walk through it all, but I want to definitely give time for questions and answers. So one of the things that I'd like for us to boycott, which will be defined as a withdrawal or social relations with organizations as a punishment or protest. We must boycott this disconnection between service providers and clients. A lot of our language is also biased, racist, homophobic, and non-inclusive, and does not put humans first. So I'll go back to the first one. When we talk about our disconnection, there are so many folks like who will come to my workshop and they say, oh, it was so great, and you were so passionate, and I just really like it. And the thing that most of these are white women, and I'm just going to be honest. And the thing that is different about what I do in my work, and most of the work, not all of the work, but most of the work of people of color, is that we bring our whole selves. We will share. We are self-aware. We will talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, but I find this to be different with some of my, even if I'm doing a training or a workshop, a lot of white people will not self-disclose. They will not say, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. And I think that we need to break that down. It doesn't make us look unprofessional to be human, you know, and we have to remember that there is a value that has been placed, and there's a privilege that is gained, you know, when we separate ourselves. So like there's that thing called white privilege that means that somehow you know better than me, or you are worth more than me. So I can put my stuff on the line and, you know, not risk being seen unprofessional, even though, because I'm already seen unprofessional, you know. But if you're going to do this work in an authentic way, I really, really encourage you to make sure you bring your full selves. And that means definitely staying safe, you know, but also making sure that you are risking a little too, because you're not growing if you're not risking anything. So if you're real about this work, and of course there are so many different nuances in that, but let's make sure that we're bringing it back home and that we're figuring out what's going on with us, and making sure that our language and our services and our actions and all of that stuff, our policies within our organizations, making sure all of that reflects people first, because we are definitely people first. So now I'd like to open it up to any questions, comments, and concerns, and also leave you with the quote that the time for action is now. It is never too late to do something. And particularly now, because we are being called to a deeper level of humanity with our current administration, and with everything, the amount of pain that's being brought to the surface in our world. So we're going to be called to do some work within ourselves in order to show up and be that person that the people who we serve need, to be that person that we need in our families, to be that person who our communities need. So we're gonna actually have to do the work, and to be patient with ourselves when we don't get it right the first time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anika. I always love hearing you speak. That poem was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I do have one question here from the audience. They were just wondering if you were able to share any of the visuals that you have in your presentation. Anika?
Am I able to share them? You mean like send them to you, or send them to them?
Yeah, if you could send them to us, we would be able to send it out to all the attendees, if that works for you, Anika.
I definitely can.
Awesome, especially that I think this question popped up a little bit after the the cycle of liberation image especially. So I think some of those images folks are interested in taking a closer look at.
Great, great. And it's also, you can just Google cycle of liberation and it'll show up too.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Anika.
No problem.
Let's see here. Another question just came in. One moment. What is the best way, a person would like to know what's the best way to get in touch with you if they'd like to set up a training with you.
Oh, great. And you know, that was one of the things that I was like, oh man, I forgot to put my email information in there. So my email address is Anika, A-N-N-I-K-A, Leonard, L-E-O-N-A-R-D, @gmail.com. My phone number is 414-750-8826.
All right, awesome. And Peter has typed that information also into the chat box, so if folks are looking for that contact information for Anika, they can find it there as well.
Thank you, Peter.
Anika, I'd like to go back to that boycott slide and ask you a little bit more about that language piece, about the racist, homophobic language. I know that you had sort of mentioned a little bit about, you know, how that shows up in the work that we're doing, and I just wondered if you have any, you know, without needing to, you know, provide triggering details necessarily, but how you see that show up in prevention work still.
Oh my gosh, still.
I know, it's a big question.
It's a huge question. Okay, so I will just, what I will do, I'll talk a little bit about a training that I recently attended about safety in the workplace, and this was a few weeks ago. So we were fresh on the heels of the officer not being Philando not being brought to justice, I will say. We were fresh on the heels of the young woman, the African-American woman who was killed with her children present. She was pregnant, shot in her belly, you know, things of that nature. So all of this is going on in the world, right? And Juneteenth Day was the day before the training. So this trainer comes in and he's like, oh, well, yeah, I was just down at Juneteenth Day, and woo, that's a, and I forgot the exact terminology that he used, but his bias showed up, right? He's like, oh, that's a wild time. That's what he said. That's a wild time. And I'm thinking to myself, what? It's a wild time. This person also happened to be from law enforcement as well. So his framework was like, he was there as a law enforcement officer, but that was a wild time. But I also felt like there weren't any incidents reported, and it was just like feeding into this narrative that like Black people are inherently dangerous or violent, So later on, he went on to talk more about law enforcement culture and like mass shootings and things of that nature. And some of the language that was used was really, really triggering. So for instance, he talked about like if there's a mass shooting, there is a code that law enforcement officers use after the shooting to like walk through rooms and see if folks are safe, which is really, really grotesque within itself, right? Like I was already traumatized just from thinking about that part alone. But then when he used the language, it just like really just shut me down. So I don't quote me on the actual colors, right? But for instance, if they walk through room from room and they label the room a certain color, and so green could mean that it's a go, nobody's harmed. Yellow could mean that there are few that are alive. Black means that everyone's dead. Like that there are no survivors or something along that nature. And I'm like, well, hell, here I am listening to this. And there are a number of other things that were said throughout this training or presentation, and that's just a small example. It's not necessarily connected to primary prevention work, but it's connected to safety, and if we've got to just be really cognizant of the way that it shows up, and not just primary prevention work, but in our lives, period. So some sensitivity, I think, would have been great. Recognition that this was the day that the last of the slaves were told that they were free would have been great. But also, like, the language was so harmful, particularly because there were so many levels of injustice that were going on during that time for African American folks. And it just seems like in that training, we just kept getting like blows. So in terms of primary prevention work, some of the ways, I think I said earlier that we can definitely make sure that we're looking at ourselves and the way that we are looking at the people that we serve. So if this person is, I'm an advocate, but I also do work within schools, and I'm in a school and I notice that, young people, and I've had this happen to me a million times. I will just put that out there. I'm a very patient person, but I'm also very rigid sometimes, which I talked about a little earlier, particularly if I feel like I really have to get this piece of the curriculum done because we need to move on to other things. Because the other piece that I didn't talk about is in the curriculum, young people get a credit for it, so I have to be able to prove that we've done certain things. So I had young people show up and they are totally stuck in everything that's going on around them. And my role as a person who is there to teach a prevention curriculum is to meet them where they're at, and sometimes it is so hard. Sometimes and especially like when I'm talking about their identity as a young person, right? Because me as an adult, like, I know that you're going to need this information later on, so you absolutely need to pay attention right now. Me as an adult, I know that you're going to need this credit. So you have to remove that layer of I know what's best. And then I had that layer of being a mom, so then I want to mama everybody, So those are ways that I've noticed that it's shown up in my work, because it's not all about someone else doing something, Those are ways that I've noticed that it shows up. Another way that it showed up, and one of my young people called me in on this as well. She told me that, so in the workshops, what I would do is, or the classroom setting, sometimes I would give extra leeway, I guess, to young folks because I knew that they were showing up with a lot of trauma. And one young person said, you know what, you just let them get away with too much. And that's a way that showed up where I thought I was doing good, but it was actually harming some of the young people in class because they weren't getting what they need. So those are some of the examples of how it's shown up in my work within the classroom, and how I've reflected on it and then switched it up.
Awesome. Thank you, Anika. We do have another question, and actually this is for Anika and Alice and Jessica. Somebody was wondering, what is your service area? So Anika, if you'd like to answer first.
My service area is Milwaukee County. I do trainings. I do trainings throughout the state, though, and I've done some national work as well. I am on the board of the all of these acronyms. So the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, they have an ACV, which is Adult Child Exposed to Domestic Violence steering committee, so I'm on their board. I recently did a SART protocol for the NSVRC, so that'll be coming out in, oh no, I didn't do the SART protocol. Let me reframe that. I discussed oppression and humanity and applying a different lens to the work of sexual assault response teams, and that'll be coming out in 2018. So I can come wherever I need to be. That's how I'll put it.
Awesome. Thank you, Anika. And Alice and Jessica, your service area?
Oh, our service area, we live and work on the border of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the Oneida Reservation. But just as Anika, we train and we participate across the nation and across the state in all of these activities.
Awesome, thank you. And I'd also like to ask another question of Wise Women Gathering Place, Alice and Jessica. Alice, I know that you come from a midwifery background, and I know you talked a little bit about that and how that shows up in your work, but I wanted to know if there's anything else about that midwifery approach that you'd like to share about how that is integrated into your sexual assault work.
Yeah, I think I hear your question right, and here's what happens to me. When I approach a problem such as sexual assault or bullying or some dangerous, toxic thing that happens to people, I always have, well, not always, but ever since I've learned about what can happen in midwifery, I believe that strengthening and supporting things that are not part of that behavior almost helps more. I was just we sent a thank you to Anika for the word, and I took the title of this presentation, which is Integrating an Anti-Oppression Approach in Sexual Violence Prevention, and I switched it out for Integrating a Liberation Approach in Sexual Violence Prevention. And to me, that had so much of a better thing that I wanted to participate in, to have that word, you know, switched out, because it does, like Jessica pointed out to me, it honors the behavior to say the word. And it would be so good if we can just wipe that word out of existence, because that behavior no longer happens, you know. And I don't think we'll ever do that by going absolutely right directly to that actual problem. It's the things that hold it in place, and examining those and pulling those apart and straightening those out is going to help us get there. So I don't know if I answered your question, but to me that's what midwifery helped me do. It's the way we treat each other in our work here, I think came from midwifery, because, you know, you can't be a midwife team, 2 or 3 women helping another woman in her birth time, and have you know, bad feelings with each other or have snarky remarks with each other. You have to be there for that woman. You have to be together there for that woman in her process, or otherwise you're imposing something bad on it. And we bring that right here into this workplace. Every day, really every day, we discuss in some measure how we're going to be together today so that everybody here is safe, everybody has what they need, and everybody is supported in doing what they got to do. And we have all committed to that on a daily basis, and we recommit every day.
And Alice often talks about how, you know, all of us here in the office, we're all midwives. You know, we weren't trained in the way she was, but we're apprenticing in other ways, and we're practicing, and we're holding those midwifery values in the work that we do. And so I really like that.
Yeah, I wasn't actually trained as a midwife either. I was not ever licensed or any sanction of anybody to be one. We just were a grassroots group of women that decided we were going to do it. And to me, that kind of flopped over onto this practice too, by just saying, you know, you are a midwife, and then over those years learning what all that means, because it is more than just about birth. It's about cradle to grave stuff, like I told you before. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, both of you. And I think what you said, Alice, about, you know, not having a license to do this, not having a training to do this necessarily, I think that's what we need to remember when trying to integrate, I'll say, liberation work into our prevention work, right? That, and as you also said, Anika, we're always going to mess up. We're never going to be getting it exactly right every single time, but having that, at least that we're trying, and recognizing that there's no number of trainings in the world that's going to make us perfect at it, but that we have to keep trying and forgiving ourselves for the mistakes, and, you know, doing our due diligence towards, you know, apologizing and just trying to be better every single day. I know Anika and I have had conversations about that before, and I think that's so important. So any final words from Anika, Jessica, or Alice, any of you, any final words just on folks who are like, I want to do this, I want to start this, I'm not sure where to start? Any final words or of advice or anything like that from any of you?
Yes, I wanted to. I've just been waiting for a moment here to add into what Anika said about, you know, you're always going to mess up and so forth. My phrase for that is kind of like, there is no safe place. You're never going to be safe. So I mean, that even if you do everything right and follow everything that everybody expects of you and don't get into any trouble and keep your nose clean and all those things that they tell you, there's no way that you're going to be left safe through it all. So, you know, understanding that and picking your place where you're going to do any risk taking, picking your principle upon which you're going to stand when you take that risk, that's what's going to help you decide that this is where I really want to do this.
Thank you, Alice. Go ahead, Anika.
And there is a Audre Lorde quote that says, we can learn to work and speak when we are afraid in the same way we have learned to work and speak when we are tired. For we have been socialized to respect fear more than our own needs for language and definition. And while we wait in silence for that luxury of fearlessness, the weight of our silence will choke us.
Yeah.
That is the Audre Lorde quote, and it just adds to what's already been said, you know. You just have to do it. You just have to do it. And it starts with self-awareness and just figuring out, like, if something comes up for you, if you're having a really strong emotion around this client or this friend or my child, like whoever it is, like figuring out where that's coming from. You know, like, what's going on for you that you need to blame this person for whatever actions are going on with them? Because somehow it's linked back to you, and you've got to do your work to figure it out. You know, we should come from a place of non-judgment and of love and as of acceptance. Like, there are some things that we absolutely draw the line on, you know, do not harm. But if harm has been done, how can we redeem ourselves and each other? So I would just say it starts with self-awareness.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our presenters today for your expertise, for your words of wisdom, for your inspiration. We really appreciate it. I do want to mention, as we're talking especially about starting with yourself and doing the work with yourself, if you are looking for resources on how to start doing that internal work, I know that Anika and Wise Women Gathering Place have really great resources available on that.
Yes.
And hopefully even more words of advice and wisdom. But also Wakasa has some resources too. So, you know, wherever you find you are comfortable reaching out, I think that there are places, there are people you can be reaching out to if you're looking for that kind of thing. So, any last words from our presenters other than that?
I just think it's so cool that, you know, it seems like right in this presentation we changed the title of the focus of what we were saying, and I just think that's just great.
Yes, thank you, Alice. This is what happens when we bring great minds together. So,
I love it.
all right, well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks to our presenters, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.